am super excited, as I always am, to have on the show today someone who's just business I admire, recently met, but business I admire, and not just the business, but her as a person. So this is going to be a good interview. Hayley Henning, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here.
Me too.
So for those listening and watching, I met Hayley through someone else, Meg Schmitz, who, if you haven't seen her interview, make sure you check it out. But when Meg was just kind of like, hey, I want you to just go ahead and get connected with her, check her out, her story is interesting. And I'm like, And after we talked, I'm like, oh my gosh. One, I had this just connection as a mom, right, to your business and what you do. So let's look at the big picture and tell me a little bit about your why for what you're doing right now, Hayley.
Yeah, so I own a children's entertainment company, and we are a franchise business concept. So we have 21 locations all over the United States. And basically what we do is we do a variety of different types of events for children. We do birthday parties, we do things with businesses, we do things after school. And we're recently starting to get into more of like a virtual concept of offering different types of like classes over Zoom, all taught by your favorite characters, your superhero princess characters. And so, I think the reason and why, and like kind of how I got started in that, it's so awesome to get to see like smiles on kids' faces. It's just really such a rewarding type of career and job. And I really enjoy getting to, do charity work. We've done a lot of stuff with different types of hospitals. And so it's a really, really fun and exciting type of job.
Wow. Now what led you here? Because you are a mom of two. It's two, right?
Yeah, 6 and 8.
Did that play any role in this business? Tell me a little bit more.
No. So I started this business when I was 19. I was actually like a struggling college student. And I grew up doing performing arts. And so, I'm in college. I moved to Los Angeles from Palm Springs, California, and LA was just a really, really difficult place to try to make it. I was trying to get a normal job, and like nobody would really hire me because I didn't have like the qualifications, and it was rough. My parents were like, Hayley, you got to go out, you got to do your own thing, you got to pay for school, you got to pay for your housing, everything. And so what ends up happening is my mom comes to me one day, she's like, you know what, you've been doing performing arts and singing your entire life. Why don't you go and like dress up as a princess for kids parties? I think you'd be really good at that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's try it out, Mom. And it was cool because my mom, she was the one that made all of my costumes as a kid for like all of the different productions that I did.
Okay.
And she was like the main seamstress for everything. So she's like, I'll make you a Cinderella costume. Why don't you go out and be a princess? And I have blonde hair. So it kind of just worked. And what was interesting was I built my first website, and I was like so nervous about it, but I literally spent like hours and hours and hours and hours. Like I'd go to school and then I'd come home and I'd just spend hours on like figuring out the internet and like how to market myself. And it was all very like grassroots. I had like no money, literally no money. I think my mom probably bought the fabric of the Cinderella dress that she first made for me.
Don't you love moms? They just help us along the way.
Yes, yeah. So anyway, it was interesting because when, I had this website, I built it myself and everything, and it was great. But I wasn't getting any leads initially. And it took me like a couple of months for me to actually get, some business. And I was literally on the brink of like telling my mom, I'm like, Mom, this isn't going to work. I'm not getting any leads like this. I think I'm going to give up. And literally like right as I'm about to give up, I get my first like phone call of this woman who found me after all this, like, SEO and marketing that I did back in like 2009, which is no different now. and she tells me, she's like, oh, my daughter's birthday is this weekend. I would love to, you know, I would love to have you come as Cinderella. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, yes, I want to be Cinderella.
Sign me up.
Yeah, sign me up. So I go to this party, and like literally it was so much fun. I had the best time, but the better thing about it was I walked out of there. I was there for like, I think 90 minutes. And I made like over $300 between like the fee that I charged and her tipping me. And like, I walked out of there, and I'm like 19. Okay. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I can never do another job again. This is way too cool. I've got to figure this out. So that was like the first taste. And then eventually over a period of time, I had this kind of like cult following in a way in LA of like all these mothers who would like hire me to be all these different types of characters, and I'd wear all these wigs. And pretty soon, like I was making a ton of money as like a 19-year-old in school. I'd like go to school during the week, and then I'd do all my birthday parties on the weekend. And then over time, you know, I started reinvesting back into the business. So at that point, I never really had any investors. I didn't even know what that kind of meant at that time. But everything that I would make, I just started to reinvest back into inventory. To a point where by the time I was about 23, I would say we were doing 250 events every weekend. So I went from, I went from me like, you know, having a few events, doing them myself, to 250 events every weekend. And I had like over 100 different contractors doing all of these events every weekend.
Oh my goodness. So I don't want to skip over a couple things. The first thing is, you know, earlier on you talked about right when you were at the point of like giving up with all you were doing to your website and not getting a lead and all this other stuff, right? This woman calls, and just talk to me for one quick second. Like think about the person who is listening and who may be thinking like, okay, yeah, this thing that I've been doing, I've been trying it, but it's not working. And maybe it's been like 6 months. I've been trying it, it hasn't been working. Like, what do you say to that person right now?
Well, I think all good things take time, and you definitely cannot expect results immediately. And that was kind of, if I was talking to my 19-year-old self, I would have said to her, keep going, keep going, keep going. Because building like that following and building a name for yourself and building that presence online, it truly does take a period of time. I didn't realize that when I was 19. But I do now, and I even apply that concept to things that we develop at the franchisor, right? Like we've recently developed doing a lot of virtual things as it relates to like performances and characters as a result of COVID. And I apply, and I think about that story in my head, like, okay, it didn't work for me initially, right? And it took me a couple months to get this rolling. And I apply that same concept today where I'm like, okay, you got to be patient. And I really do think that good things come to people who wait and are persistent.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you on that. That patience is something.
My mom told me from the time I was like 5, she's like, Hayley, patience is a virtue. It took me so long to figure that out because obviously like it's easier said than done, right? But I swear, patience really is a virtue. And if you can be persistent and patient with a concept, especially if you are, you know, you really believe in your product and what you're doing, and your product or your service is really helping someone. I think, you know, just adding that patience component will take you a long way.
Absolutely. So now let's jump back into the whole 250 events every weekend. Let's just tap into your mindset at this point, because I'm guessing in my mind, there are probably some pivotal things that are about to start happening right in that moment. So just tell me, where is your head at?
Okay, well, my head was going insane because I also had a baby.
Ah.
Yeah, so I actually got pregnant with my daughter by accident. And I also had a newborn baby at like the height of all of this. It was pretty intense, but I really can say that I had two really, really amazing managers at that time that were sort of quarterbacking everything. So it wasn't as intense, but it is really intense and a bit nerve-wracking to actually worry about 250 events going on at like one time is it's a lot. It's a lot psychologically too, just because those events are mainly birthday parties, and like you're bringing that special like happiness to that child, and they are like counting on you, like it is like the be all end all of their day. So it kind of puts a lot of pressure, not just and on a from a business perspective, but from your heart.
Yeah. You know what? And it's funny because that's not something that I ever really thought about. Like the fact that, like, yes, this child is really like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to see, whoever, Elsa or whoever, and that there is so much emotion wrapped up in that for them.
Oh,
and you
yeah.
are kind of, you're carrying that.
And it's very emotional for the parents too.
Really? Why is that?
I always say that for us, our customer is not really the child, it's generally the mother. The mother, I think, especially when they're really young, and if it's like one of their first kids, they're just so, like, a birthday is such a big deal for them. They're celebrating kind of this amazing experience that they've had by having a child, and they generally speaking want to see their child light up with magic and get to experience that joy. So it's a really fun and interesting concept for sure.
So let's go back for a second, because I always like to talk about that moment, and you kind of talked about that moment. I'll explain what I'm saying in a second. You kind of talked about that moment earlier, being when you were 19, the lady makes the phone call, you end up walking away with $300. You're like, oh my gosh, never working a job again.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that moment, because I think there is something in those moments where either, you've figured out that, okay, I can do this thing on my own, right? Or you break away from, again, ever having worked a job again. Like, tell me about that, just from a whole mental and attitude perspective.
Yeah, so at that time I was 19, and I feel like at that point in my life, I didn't really have as many responsibilities as I have right now. So if you're a listener that is in your 30s with kids, your perspective might be a little bit different than a 19-year-old who's like, I have nothing to lose. I'm already poor.
Just go for it.
But yeah, I grew up in performing arts, and I had been singing since I was like 6, and I'd get paid a lot of money actually to sing. I know it sounds crazy, but I did. And from a 6 or 7, 8-year-old's perspective, if I'm walking home with $300, $400, $500 every time I go sing a few songs somewhere, that was a big deal to me. Mm-hmm. And I've always done that. And I worked really, really hard as a kid. I even tell people I feel like I've had a job since I was 6. Because being in entertainment, you have a responsibility, right? Like, you have a responsibility to show up for something. You have a responsibility to the people that you are performing for. So I had that taste in my mouth of like what it felt like to make money from a very young age. And so at 19, I was like, I just couldn't envision myself like being in a situation where like literally my option was you go be a hostess at, some restaurant, okay, where I'm like having to serve people, or you kind of decide your own destiny and take the talents that you have and try to make something out of them. Right. And so I think as like a 19-year-old, it was a lot easier for me to say, hey, look, I'm gonna throw everything to the wall and see what sticks and see if I can do this. My perspective from like I'm 31 now, but from a 31-year-old with children, I would say devote a lot of time and energy and passion into whatever your project is, but also don't like ignore the responsibilities that you have. For me right now, I have children as a responsibility. So, you know, you got to make sure that you're kind of in line with all the components of your life in the present moment.
Mm-hmm. You've taken the time to understand. And I always like to say, you know, it's not, you know, especially for those who are trying to make it to a full-time entrepreneur standpoint, right? They're trying to get there. The fact of having children, now your entrepreneurship started, it was early,
Right.
but even for those that are listening that are in their 30s who are like, yeah, that's gonna be me on the full-time entrepreneur track one day, as long as, to your point, right, you can stay in balance with what your responsibilities are, understand what that passion is, find a way to monetize it, but also don't let the fact that you have life happening be an excuse. And that's
right. Well, and here's the thing too, and to that end, I really believe that if you want to be an entrepreneur, you really, really have to be extremely focused and make it a priority, right? So like going to that party or having that, you know, dinner out and drinking a bunch of wine that you feel like junk the next day, you really have to say to yourself, what are my priorities? I'm a firm believer that you can really only have 3 things that you do very well. And for me, I pick, you know, my children, my job, and my health, and I really focus in on those 3 things and make sure that I do them very well and efficiently. And so I think if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, you really have to make sure that your goals are in line with your priorities.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that.
Yeah.
Amen. I like to speak for myself when I say I don't do it all, can't do it all, don't do it all.
No, it's
To
hard.
your point,
Really
right?
hard.
Pick some things to focus on.
You do.
I love it. So with your kiddos, now I'm sure they know what you do. They see it every day, right? You've got businesses, you've got multiple locations all over the place. How do they feel about what you do? Like, is that exciting for them?
So my daughter was super into it when she was really young. Like I'd have, you know, like all these different characters coming over all the time, and she'd be like so excited, and she was really into that. My son has never been into like any characters. He really could care less. I swear, he's like this. He's all only into like Legos, and he's never. It's so weird. I take the kid to the toy store, and he like has a hard time picking out a toy. Like he doesn't really really much. So he's like, yeah, whatever, mom. Like I don't really, you know, I don't care. Man, sorry. But with my daughter, she was really, really into it for a period of time, and she had, you know, the best birthday parties with all the characters there all the time, and it was super exciting for her. But now they're a little immune to it. They're kind of like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like I've put her in a couple like promo videos and stuff for us, and her reactions are not what I need them to be.
Can you raise this up a notch?
Yeah, I'm like, hey, this is the Snow Queen on TV.
Oh, I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
So you talk to me a little bit, Hayley. You as a franchisor, and you have how many franchises now?
Yeah, so we have 21 locations now.
Okay, so 21 locations. So you know what it's like to raise a business and to scale it out.
Yes.
Talk to me about your top 3 tips when it comes to growing a business and scaling it.
Okay, great. I'm glad you asked that question. So I think first and foremost, you really need to understand like what your unique selling proposition is. And you really need to understand your customer, right? Like how are you going to help them? What are their pain points? You know, are you providing something that is going to improve their life? And if so, how? You have to communicate that to them. And I think it's incredibly important, you know, in your marketing that you're communicating what is special about you and how you're going to help them. That's a key point. The other thing, and I find this a lot with different entrepreneurs, and even like my franchisees know I'm kind of a stickler about this, but it's price. and really understanding the value of what it is that you're offering, right? So if I'm a business owner, I could say something, I've spent hundreds of hours on my project, right? And I think it's worth thousands of dollars, but you really have to understand like price from the perspective of what is that customer going to pay for what it is that you're offering. You don't, and especially when you're getting something going from like the ground up, from my experience, and this is what I had done, I was priced incredibly competitively. And I feel like that worked to my advantage, right? Because I had that opportunity to show people what I could do. And then I could raise my prices after I had kind of a name and a reputation for myself. So I think price is very, very important of what it is that you're offering. And then understanding you need to value what it is that you're offering from the perspective of what you think someone's actually going to pay for it. And you really can't be afraid to kind of put in that sweat equity at a lesser rate, for a period of time while you're trying something out. I think that's very important to really test, what works. And we do that a lot too, right? With like our classes that we're offering on Zoom right now with, the Little Mermaid and all these different characters, right? Like we're split testing all of these concepts and ideas to sort of see what works and what people are willing to pay for the service. And then the last thing, and I feel like this is sort of goes without saying, but it's worth saying. I think in business, like you have a fiduciary duty to be good to the people that you work with and to put their best interests in front of your own. And even without a contract that says you have an obligation to do X, Y, and Z, I think it's really, really important to, with anybody that you work with in your company, right? Your employees, your contractors, my franchisees, right? Like I want to put the people that I work with, their interests first. So that way I feel like it comes back to you tenfold. When you're good to people, like for example, if I'm a business coach, okay, I'm not going to upsell you on a bunch of different products just to try to get you to give me money, right? I'm going to do the best interest for you and that client. And when you do something like that, you're really going to get so much more at the end of the day. It might take you longer, but you're really going to have a streamlined business that works ethically at the end of the day.
Do the right thing.
Yeah, do the right thing. Exactly. Do the right thing. I can't stress it enough. Do the right thing.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And those are great tips. And I love when you talk about testing. So I'm a huge fan of just testing, like test and learn, test everything. And the thing is, there's so much freedom. In my opinion, there is so much freedom if you are willing to test and you are willing to say, I could be wrong. That's why I test. Yeah. How freeing is that? Like you don't have to have the right answer. You don't have to have it perfect the first time. See what works.
No, and that's true. I mean, we test a lot, especially if any of your listeners want to like research split testing or A/B testing, I highly recommend it. If you're running any sort of ad campaign, it's so important that you do split test different things, whether it's audiences, whether it's your unique selling proposition, the ad copy, the images, the video. I mean, you really want to hone in on those and don't. And it goes back to this concept of being patient, right? Like, don't just give up because the first ad that you post doesn't work. It's going to take a period of time and testing for things to start moving.
Absolutely. I love it. All right. What's next for you, Hayley? Just as an entrepreneur, what's next for you?
So right now I've been working really, really hard on developing kind of this virtual component for Characters.io. We're putting together, and it's actually already been implemented, but it's relatively new. We have a couple different options. So first, you can virtually chat with pretty much any character through us. We offer like a live chat where you can literally, like how we're on Zoom right now, you can live chat with like your favorite princess or superhero. So we offer a variety of different characters for that. But then the next piece to that is we're offering different types of classes taught by your favorite character. So for example, the Little Mermaid may be teaching about the oceans and fish, or Cinderella might be like singing you a nighttime song, or Rapunzel might be teaching you how to paint and doing an art craft. And what's really cool about that, and especially as it relates to like COVID, right? And we both know because we're mothers. It's so hard. Like, I want to answer an email in privacy or in peace without somebody screaming in the background, right? So we kind of take that pressure off parents by entertaining them in a way at home, in the safety of their own home, where we're not worried about COVID and we're not worried about all these things, but parents can have a little bit of privacy. The classes are 30 minutes long, and yeah, you can actually try a free class with us right now, and I'll give you the link. Maybe you want to share that later.
Yes,
yeah.
please do. And I'm going to catch up with you after the show because I need to get that going for my girls. And I know when we last talked, I was just, because you talked about switching to the virtual concept, and I'm like, gosh, that is fantastic.
Yeah, and what I love about this too, especially as it relates to my franchisees, is it's really giving them an opportunity for recurring revenue. And I feel like that's something that's really been needed. So in a way, COVID sort of pushed us to, and initially I was like, oh my God, like I was so scared about COVID because it almost made like our concept obsolete. But COVID really has pushed us to explore different areas where, like, going back to what I said previously, right? Like, what is your customer's pain point? Where can you help them, right? Mothers right now, they need help entertaining their kids, educating their kids at home because they're out of school, and a lot of these kids are not going back to school, right? So we've pivoted in such a way where we took our concept pre-COVID and figured out what the pain points were of our customer. And now we're trying to help them, at home.
I love it. Well done, Hayley. So if somebody's listening right now, probably a mom, maybe your dad, who knows, but they are dying to get some free time, dying to get some entertainment for their children, where can they find out more?
Well, you would go to the characters.io. So it's https://characters.io.
Perfect. And for everybody listening,
www.characters.io. Sorry.
Well, for everybody that's listening or watching, don't worry. I will make sure that we have in the show notes at CandaceFierce.com a link to characters.io and Hayley's info so that you can make sure you go and you check it out for sure.
Yeah. And I'll give you the link for the free class too.
Perfect. So I'll put that in the show notes too so you can check it out. Hayley, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a great time.
So to everybody listening and watching, you know what I always say. Don't just take what you've heard and hold on to it. Take it and put it into action. So I hope you have a great day, a great evening, whenever you're listening or watching. And I'll talk to you again very, very soon.